A new wave of digital tool is changing how the world measures, checks, and trades emission reductions, making carbon markets more transparent, reliable, and easier to navigate. What could climate cooperation look like when countries can work together with the speed and clarity of modern digital systems? Welcome to Carbon Markets Now, bringing you timely discussions with key players across the carbon market landscape and exploring the policies, tools, and innovations that are shaping the future of international cooperation on climate action. My name is Kazuhisa Koakutsu. Kazu. I'm the director of the Article 6 Implementation Partnership Center, known as A6IP. In this episode, we are focusing on digital infrastructure for international carbon markets. I'm joined by two leading experts at the forefront of this digital innovation. Gemma Torres-Vives, climate change specialist at the World Bank. Thank you, Gemma, for joining. And Eva Stefana Bicciute, Director of Strategy and Outreach at CatTrust. Eva, again, also welcome to joining this podcast. Both guests are deeply engaged in the transition towards digital carbon or using technology to ensure transparency and scale of carbon markets. First, we'll unpack key aspects of digital infrastructure for international carbon markets. Then we will spotlight on the perspectives and initiatives of our guests. Digital infrastructure for international carbon markets allows countries and institutions to confidently cooperate on climate action at a global scale. Climate markets relying on trust that emission reductions or removals are real, verified, and accounted for accurately. But historically, the underlying infrastructure has been more fragmented or manual, in many cases depending on spreadsheets or separate national systems. Digital carbon market infrastructure aims to change that by creating more interconnected, transparent, and efficient foundation for how carbon credits are generated, tracked, transferred, and used. One of the core components of this transition are digital carbon registries. The systems countries use to issue, hold, authorize, and transfer carbon credits, helping to ensure accurate accounting and prevent issues like double counting. Because there are currently different systems developed by different countries and standard bodies, the carbon market ecosystem has become much more diverse, at the same time fragmented. That's where decentralized metadata platform can have a transformational impact. These platforms can act as a common layer that connects many different registries and reporting systems. This greatly strengthens transparency across the carbon market. Another example is the move towards digitized, automated monitoring, reporting, and verification emission reductions and removals, often called digital MRV. Instead of relying primarily on periodic reports, digital MRV uses tools like satellite, sensors, mobile data collection, and standardized reporting platform. This allows emission reduction to be monitored in real time and verified using consistent digital workflows. For countries implementing international carbon markets under the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, this can enable faster, much more reliable data that supports environmental integrity. So building this infrastructure is foundational to accelerating climate cooperation. Digital system can lower transactional costs, building trust, and help ensure mitigation outcomes are credible. Most importantly, they can enable carbon markets to operate with transparency and integrity. So now, let's turn to our guests. Let's start with the big picture of digital infrastructure for international carbon markets. So Gemma, let's begin with the World Bank perspectives. How does the World Bank view an end-to-end digital ecosystem as a catalyst for transforming how governments manage carbon assets, moving beyond spreadsheet-based approaches towards digitally connected systems aligned with broader economic and climate goals? So Gemma, please.
Thank you, Kazakhstan, for the question, and it's an honor to be today in this session. So at the World Bank, through the Climate Warehouse program, we are advancing this view of carbon markets require this end-to-end digital ecosystem. This is a set of foundational digital building blocks that can support the full life cycle of a carbon asset, from project development and MRV through issuance, transfer, and retirement. So these digital building blocks, some of them you mentioned them, Kazu, just now. These include systems such as national greenhouse gas inventories, which provide official emission accounting baseline. These include digital MRV systems, which enable more timely, granular, and verifiable emission data. We also talk about registries, which help us issue, track, and manage the carbon units. And last but not least, trading platforms and marketplaces to facilitate the market transactions. And all of these systems, we envision them underpinned by this data infrastructure that helps harmonize across the full life cycle. And of course, these systems need to be aligned with the national and the international regulatory frameworks, as well as with the standard bodies, no? But in practice, when we envision this end-to-end digital ecosystem, this reflects a shift on how governments can manage their carbon markets, their carbon assets in three important ways. And the first one is we can move from spreadsheets to life cycle governance. So instead of treating carbon credits as a static units, inventories, a digital ecosystem will enable governments to manage a carbon asset as a dynamic instrument with fully traceability and auditability, right? The second way is that we move from isolated systems to connected infrastructure. So an end-to-end digital ecosystem will enable interoperability across registries and related systems by embedding common data standards, shared identifiers, and application program interfaces. And this will allow governments to link domestic platforms with other international platforms and broader market infrastructure. And last but not least, another way that we see this shift on how governments can manage their carbon assets is that we move from project level reporting to more national portfolio management. So this approach will enable governments to view carbon assets not only as individual transactions, but as part of the broader national climate and economic strategy linked to the NDC implementation. So in essence, back to your question, Kazu, the World Bank is focused on helping countries building this end-to-end digital ecosystem that can act as a true catalyst for transforming how governments manage carbon assets, enabling a shift from fragmented, spreadsheet-based administrations to a more trusted, scalable carbon markets aligned with the national climate goals. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Gemma, for sharing how you see or World Bank digital system. Especially you are supporting government to manage those assets. So from more static to much more dynamic, linking with different system is really challenging. So thank you very much for sharing your big picture of how you see this digital ecosystem. So now, Eva, turning to CATRUST, people could describe your platform as a connective tissue of the carbon market. For those new to this space, could you explain how a decentralized metadata layer could be the big picture solution to the diverse and fragmentation we see across the many different carbon registries today? So, Eva, please.
Thank you, Kazu. Thank you very much for the invitation. And the connective tissue is actually such a great term. I think I'll steal and use that more often because that's really what we do and what we're aiming to be. So broadly speaking, we work to enable cooperation and transparency, right? And what we're seeing is that across governments, across the private sector, across independent crediting programs and the UN, carbon markets are not short of ambition, but they are often where they fall short is in connectivity and communication between different systems. And that creates problems when you want to cooperate quickly and you want to move fast in order to achieve climate goals. So zooming in into carbon credit data, today it sits across dozens of independent program registries that certify emissions reductions. Some estimates say that there are around 50 or 60 in operation, various sizes. Countries are moving ahead, developing national systems for both crediting emissions reductions as well as tracking on a national level. The UN mechanisms are moving ahead. And basically, there's no central place that kind of oversees the issuance of carbon credits around the world, nor a single place where this information is tracked. So every time that you need to either figure out what's happening, often on the other side of the world, across a different system, or use information from these different registries to get oversight of what's happening within, say, a given country or a sector, or enable compliance reporting or analytics, that fragmentation creates real friction, right? And there are emerging digital platforms that are aiming to help. And governments certainly have a task cut out for them on tracking, enabling transparency. But essentially, this fragmentation creates duplication and real administrative costs at the end of the day, that can impede in carbon markets becoming a real instrument for climate finance and achieving NDCs. So, and we're seeing this need for systems to talk to each other a lot more, right? Like we've been talking about the convergence between voluntary and compliance markets in the abstract, but now we see it happening in practice, right? Like a specific crediting program, credits might be eligible in 3, 4, 15 national compliance programs. They might be seeking, authorization for CORSIA. Some of these programs might underpin Article 6.2 cooperation, and at every time these systems start to talk to each other, for governments, this means you need to collect data, you need to cross-check different systems, you need to translate it from inconsistent formats into something that means something consistent and standard. And this takes time. So CAT Trust acts as that neutral metadata layer that does not aim to replace registries, but instead connects them into a digital network so that governments or anyone else looking for a source of truth across systems don't have to rebuild or duplicate infrastructure. So that's how the connective issue works in practice. We are a network of registries and a public source of information, public digital infrastructure that can help people discover information from different carbon credit systems, what's being issued, where is it eligible, kind of who is retiring credits and for what purpose. And we also harmonize how this information is structured so that all these different systems can speak the same language without requiring bespoke integrations every time. So in this way, we aim to reduce the need for manual reconciliation, which in turn then lowers transaction costs and shortens the time that is needed to verify and report on the carbon credit activity that is happening across jurisdictions and across systems. So having a single neutral public good place can really mean, in practice, that governments are enabled to move from these static spreadsheets that Gemma has mentioned, and ad hoc checks and email communication to using a public source of structured, comparable, and searchable credit level data that could then support faster oversight and decision making. So, in short, that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Eva. And it's really, carbon market is growing from more national level or subnational level, many independent standards, bilateral or UN. I think CAT Trust clearly put this into one in a way that could be more easy to see what's happening. So I think that really creates a lot of transparency and kind of interconnectivity. You are not directly connected, but still you are presenting them as a kind of one bigger picture of the carbon market with the diversity, with much more kind of different operations ongoing. So thank you very much for really sharing the latest kind of what the Cat Trust is doing. So let's move on to a more specific topic, like Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which is definitely one of the important areas for this tracking and digital MRB. So Gemma, let's focus on Article 6 context. A significant factor for successful Article 6 implementation is to ensure environmental integrity through accurate accounting. So how is the World Bank support through technical assistance on the digital infrastructure, particularly registries and digital monitoring, reporting, verification systems, as you also explained earlier, helping host countries, government, measure and track international transfer mitigation outcomes. ITOMOS, maybe those who listen in this podcast may now know much more familiar with this term, ITOMOS, and reduce the risk of double counting. So Gemma, please.
Thank you, Kazu-san. Indeed, if there's one make or break factor for Article 6, it's the credibility of accounting, all right? And at the end of the day, Article 6 only works if countries can perform credible accounting, and that ultimately depends on how strong the coordination between policy decisions, registry operations, and the underlying MRB evidence. And in this context, the World Bank support focuses on helping countries to strengthen their digital infrastructure that will underpin this accurate accounting, particularly registries and digital MRB systems. And this support aims to help countries to measure, track, and report ITMOS in a more robust and transparent manner and reduce the risk of double counting. How do we do that, right? So we focus on 3 priority areas. The first one for technical assistance and capacity building. The first one is strengthening the unit lifecycle management and authorization processes. This is important because well-designed registries enable the country to manage the full life cycle of a carbon unit, from issuance to authorization where applicable, to transfer and cancellation or retirement. And this is where the safeguards against double counting become operational in practice. So here we help countries. Let's define what is the technical scope of your registry. Is it going to include a full suite of functions like accounting, tracking, issuance, and transaction, or it's only going to include a subset of those based on your national needs and your market readiness? So the functional and the technical scope, to define this from the beginning, is really important to create this robust foundational system. And secondly, ensuring that they are aligning to internationally recognized data models. And these include adopting standards such as the Agreed Electronic Format, AEF of UNFCCC, and the Climate Action Data Trust Data Model, as Yeva was just referring to before. So secondly, our technical assistance focuses very linked to what I just said, improving interoperability for consistent transparency, consistent and transparent reporting. And we see that Article 6 transactions typically involve multiple systems, national registries, partner country registries, independent standard platforms. So in this technical assistance, the World Bank supports the adoption of these common data structures and ensures that these different architectures, even within domestic or internationally, they are interoperable and helps reduce reconciliation gaps. And last but not least, another area of technical assistance and capacity building is leveraging tools to reinforce the evidence base through digital MRB. So using tools such as remote sensing, ground sensors, more automated reporting workflows. And this will help the granularity and the consistency of the emission reduction data, because this is giving us real-time data instead of old, outdated manual data as we have seen in the past. So while digitalization does not replace the need for a strong institutional governance and independent verification, it will reduce the uncertainty and enables potential issues to be detected much earlier in the crediting cycle. So putting all back together, our support really aims to help countries to build the trusted digital backbone for high integrity Article 6 participation, So they can be able to measure, track, and report the ITMOs through these areas on registries and digital MRVs.
Thank you, Gemma, for sharing real examples of how the World Bank is supporting. As you mentioned, that you are supporting government with the technical assistance, but at the same time, really focusing on what is required for the Article 6, like authorization, then all the dynamics, changing, and at the same time, World Bank is supporting the actual tools for this digital MRB. So that's great, and looking forward to see the actual kind of a government really managing those important infrastructure and how that put into practice of Article 6. So now let's move to EBA. So the Article 6 will function best with robust interoperability between national registries. I think we also touch upon this topic of interoperability, which promotes accurate and consistent reporting. With the recent launch announcement of Data Model version 2.0, how is the CATRUST simplifying the reporting process for governments that need track their Article 6 authorized units? So, Eva, please.
Thank you, Kazu. And I'll build on what Gemma said because a lot of, I think we cover a lot of similar ground. So CATRUST looks to simplify government participation in Article 6 in two ways. One is in developing these common data models that help enable interoperability in practice. So Data Model 2.0 is built on our 3 years of experience integrating 12 very different registries that now cover around 90% of credits that have ever been issued. And we've received feedback from all the connected registries in developing it. So we believe it reflects all that experience and the diversity of systems, as well as the UNFCCC guidance on the agreed electronic format. So 2.0 is our effort to essentially make key carbon credit data more discoverable, as I touched in the previous question, and also enable AEF exports. We have also been collaborating closely with the Climate Data Steering Committee, who led efforts to develop common data standards in the G20 mandate last year. So really kind of working across the ecosystem to develop data standards that can become that common language for different systems to talk to each other. So that's kind of one area. And the second area is very practical, right? So Article 6 creates real reporting obligations. So governments need to extract information, essentially, from registries where the cooperative approaches are tracked, and they need to submit it to the UNFCCC following the guidelines of the agreed electronic format. Many countries who are starting to engage in Article 6, or CORSIA for that matter, are working on building their registry systems, but don't yet have an option to get consistent national oversight of what's happening within the boundaries, or necessarily to perform this reporting function. And so as we touched on earlier, without interoperability, this reporting, which is at the end of the day a simple Excel template, becomes manual and it becomes time consuming, and it can introduce the risk of inconsistencies. So CATRUST is also working to simplify this by making it easier to access aggregated data on all the credits that are authorized from the connected registries, because it's then structured a common data model, and using our public infrastructure to make it easier for governments to extract this information into the AEF reporting. So we are working with partners, including A6IP, as well as some early mover countries who are now starting to work with independent programs and authorizing these credits, but don't yet have the capacity to do this reporting domestically, to basically test out how the existence of public infrastructure can support practical reporting workflows, and support the emerging UN systems, and also national registry development, as Gemma was saying. So it's really, we're in this phase where a lot of governments are starting to grapple with these reporting obligations practically for the very first time. And we are still in a place where the infrastructure that will ultimately, we hope will be connected and support these processes seamlessly does not yet exist. So that's also where we as public good infrastructure are aiming to support and accelerate Article 6 cooperation. And the data model and the infrastructure are part of that.
Thank you. We are very excited about the launch of Data Model 2.0 here in A6IP, and this is really great because like a standardization is really also important to kind of comparability or interoperability, and that really kind of smooth kind of exchange of information across various markets data. So I think this is something really we are excited to hear about this. At the same time, Article 6 context, we also very glad to hear Catras is also kind of helping the agreed elect format, which is of course another kind of jargon in this space, but basically governments or countries needs to track all these ITOMOS transactions and reported annually. So that's also very dynamic, changing kind of every time. And so with really kind of updated, seamless kind of reporting is much more important. And I'm also glad to hear that that is where the Catalyst is also supporting. So yeah, let's move on. Now I'd like to ask a bit of a follow-up on this. Eva, you recently been connecting major registries. Again, we are also talking about this digital infrastructure. So like Vera registry, Gold Standard registry, I'm sure you're also connecting major other registries and also national government registries to your platform, CareTrust. So could you please share the most common technical challenges you encounter when onboarding a new partner, and how is a CareTrust is overcoming it? So Eva, let's over to you.
Sure. And we could spend a whole day on this, but I'll keep it very brief, because really we've seen acceleration and these processes getting easier, and we're actively working to do it. Right. So as often is the case when you're trying to get, imagine doing a group project where everybody comes from a different context, has a slightly different system. Often they want to work together, but there are slight differences in how data is structured, what electronic systems can currently support, and due to this lack of standardization and harmonization that we touched on earlier. So as a very practical example, a project, we all know the rough project lifecycle. Like there will be processes for registering projects, issuing credits, retiring them, etc. That looks slightly different across systems. They're broadly doing the same thing, but perhaps record that information slightly differently. That's what creates these needs for reconciliation. So we're solving this by one. That's where the common data model is really important. So we say, we know that there are differences. We want to have a common denominator that helps record key information from these very different systems. And that's why it's so important that everybody kind of currently, doing things in the carbon market, participate and co-created, which is why CareTrust was set up this way as a collaborative governing institution. So this common schema is really important. And so 2.0 is, again, as I said, builds on 3 years of learnings around integrating different registry systems, and is also aligned with and helped inform other major initiatives like the Common Carbon Credit Data Model, initiated at the G20, ISO efforts, etc. So moving towards common data standards is step one. And that's kind of actually the first step of the onboarding process for registries. So we say, okay, your system records these key data fields this way. We then ask every onboarding registry to map it, to basically say, this field is recorded as X in my system. I might translate it to Y on CareTrust, and we both agree that this means the same thing. So if there are any inconsistencies that are identified in the process, we would normally help the technical folks at the registry or crediting program team to resolve them, and then test this data alignment and interoperability in practice. So that's kind of step one, basically translating. And this is normally the hardest part, really. Then the other practicality is essentially an API connection, or a bridging measure. Like once a data structure has been determined and aligned, then it's just basically receiving a real-time data flow onto the CATRA system. So I'd say, like, from our experience, is this data mapping and the translation that becomes a bigger bottleneck. And then, of course, as some of you who are deep in this space will know, there is a move towards transferring different programs of changing registry providers. So if you have a big migration going on in an infrastructure that you use every day, then you need to kind of remap and work with those timelines as well, which also does sometimes come up with partners. But essentially what I'm trying to say is this data translation is a big part, and that's why the move toward data standards will really, really help. And that will also enable us to connect registries faster and enable all of the use cases around data reconciliation, reporting, and credit verification move a lot faster.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those really onboarding experiences and highlighting the practical realities of scaling interoperability. But certainly, I think data standardization really helps in terms of addressing those issues. Just the compilation of the data is not enough, as I can see it. It's we really need to manage those data and also kind of making sure that those data is consistent and resolving those considerations. Those efforts is much needed. So thank you so much on sharing. And of course, this is on day-to-day experience, I can really assume. But let's move on. So now, Gemma, let's take a moment to highlight the World Bank support for digital infrastructure, especially you are supporting the government, as you mentioned, and particularly under the Partnership for Market Implementation, PMI, which is, of course, one of the flagship initiative by the World Bank. Could you please share the key lessons learned and success factors from the recent pilots where the bank supported countries in designing integrated carbon registries and digital MRV systems? So we'd like to hear those real examples from the country. So Gemma, please.
Absolutely. Thank you. We do gather so many lessons learned from country pilots, and considering that we're relatively in the early stages of development and deployment of digital infra, we see already a lot of use case that can be replicated, and we have blueprints. But one lesson that we see repeatedly is that building in an integrated and robust digital infrastructure is as much institutional as it is technical. And this applies directly to registries and digital MRVs, because one key success factor that we've seen in our country experiences is that those that have from the beginning very clear vision about their institutional arrangements and the governance of these systems, they move faster and avoid costly redesign later. So when registry and digital MRV development is paired with a strong governance framework, like featuring clear roles across ministries, across authorities, across who's going to be the administrator, who's going to be the operator, that really makes the difference. In some country pilots, for example, with the Royal Government of Bhutan, their carbon market policy framework really explicitly defined in advance which institution would be the administrator and the IT operator, which made it easier for the development and the implementation process, and also had clarity on how digital MRV functions, connects across ministerial lines to enable more effective cross-sector coordination. Another practical win that we saw from pilots, and this is very related to what Yeva was just saying, is start with a minimal interoperable data model. And by data model, no, we mean a framework taxonomy with all these relevant data points for accounting reporting. We saw experiences in countries such as India that establishing this core interoperable data foundation early, drawing from the CATRA's data model or the agreed electronic format, really enables registries and digital MRVs to connect incrementally to partners and platforms. And instead of building a fully comprehensive system in one day, start with these more basic foundational element, which is make sure your data model is interoperable and it's aligned with the main frameworks and do the data mapping, no? Another critical lesson that we learned, Kazakhstan, is that digitizing must follow workflow simplification. So if you have a fragmented workflow and you digitize it, the fragmentation will persist in that digital form, right? So in some contexts, we saw that MRV data, for example, may pass through multiple manual handoffs from project developer spreadsheets to verifier reporters to registry uploads, each using different formats and validation steps. So digitizing this chain without prior harmonization, no, to what Yeva was referring, merely accelerates more inconsistency and more reconciliation burden. So the greatest value emerges when countries further streamline and standardize core MRB and registry workflows, such as data submission templates, verification checkpoints, or unit issuance procedures, and only then digitize and connect the end-to-end digital ecosystem. So this was another critical lesson. A further lesson that we got relates more to how digital MRV is being operationalized in practice. So in recent pilots, the World Bank is working with the standard bodies and infrastructure providers to evolve methodologies that can accommodate digital measurement and reporting processes. And the objective is that we will maintain the integrity while improving the efficiency and reducing costs. No, one example is the World Bank Ascend project, which aims to accelerate sustainable energy access for 100 million people and clean cooking access for 20 million people across more than 20 countries in Africa, East and Southern region through off-grid solar, mini-grids, grid extensions, and clean cooking. This initiative includes the development of a digital MRV system designed to semi-automate the verification process of emission reductions, reducing the verification effort by more than half and helping unlock and scale finance flows from carbon markets. And this digital MRV is being designed to interface directly with the registry, with the marketplace platform. So this is an example of semi-automating this verification, big scale, no? And so the message in terms of all these lessons learned is clear. Start with a strong governance and institutional arrangements, and then establish this foundational interoperability across MRB and registry layers, and then scale this functionality progressively rather than attempting to integrate everything at once. So that would be maybe one key message to consolidate all these lessons that I just said.
Thank you, Gemma, for also sharing those very important lessons, and you summarized quite well. So, of course, I don't need to summarize, but I also see really importance of kind of institutional arrangement, very good governance, but at the same time, like a more seamless flow of data that can be kind of end-to-end with much more streamlined and also much more automated. I think that really kind of unlock many important area of this digitalization. So, and I again looking forward to hearing more from the World Bank important support for the countries for digitizing this really important part of this carbon market. So let's move on to the last segment, which we look at the more future-looking and outlook, and also zoom out a little bit and how the future of the digitalization of carbon. So Eva, as we move towards a more liquid and globally connected, we are also talking about all the connections, interoperability of different markets, and which you are really kind of working on it. What role do you see for emerging technology like AI in analyzing the massive amounts of metadata CATRAS is aggregating? So please, Eva, your perspectives.
This is a great segue to what Gemma was saying, actually. I'd like to also take a step back, and I think this moment, right, when AI is front of center and we're seeing a huge emphasis on digitization and machine learning, is really highlighting the importance of the quality of the underlying data sets, right? And so these conversations about what can we do with this massive data set are important, and they will be increasingly important in the future. But right now, I see the immediate priority as getting the data foundations right. So right now, as we've kind of touched on for this hour, it's really getting to a place where we have clean workflows, reliable, structured, and comparable data across every step, and a clear access to this information. These are really the priorities that we're focused on, and that's, I think, a critical step to get right before markets can become fully digitalized and before predictive analytics and advanced tools can really kind of demonstrate their power. There's a really good kind of quip used in tech circles, right? Garbage in, garbage out. If you, as Gemma was saying earlier, if you digitize a system without getting the data foundations right, the results will not be reliable and will not be trustworthy. And actually, that's where we need to move. But so Cat Trust's role really is to strengthen these data foundations. So move toward developing and helping systems adopt data standards, working towards interoperable and connected registry systems, national and independent, and supporting that backbone of trusted public infrastructure that can aggregate and structure this data consistently. And from there on, we've already seen, so much. I mean, the private sector, as you know, is keen to go ahead and innovate. There's also really interesting pilots happening on government level on, what to do and kind of how to integrate analytics, so that the full lifecycle management of carbon assets can be really accelerated and inform government decisions. But yeah, it's really exciting. But I think right now we're really focused on getting these foundations right. And then looking forward, I mean, you can think about, detecting double counting risks on a more automated way, right? Once you have a consistent data foundation for many different systems, you can very easily build out algorithmic detection of potential risks. And then through a connected infrastructure, flag it to underlying registries to resolve, for example. You could start looking at analytics of, what activity is being authorized across different countries and draw out comparisons of, that could empower better South-South cooperation and kind of share learnings around what's being done. There's a lot of innovation, which, we've seen kind of talking to how the private sector is handling this now, just really going to the messy, unstructured, project development documents and extracting kind of trends and learnings from that could then inform kind of creation and standardization of methodologies in all sectors, right, and kind of scale these learnings. And all of this has a lot of potential, but it will only work if we kind of agree on a common language and deploy it across systems. So yeah, that's what we're focusing on with an eye on the future.
Thank you. It really seems like that Cat Trust is building a strong data foundation, which may be definitely useful as well as very essential for real stakeholders who are really investing their resources. And with this, as you rightly mentioned, with the very foundation of this data quality, maybe we can utilize AI or more massive data analysis, which really kind of give us much more kind of accuracy in a sense, and also much more kind of predictability with those accumulated data. So I really see the lot of strong foundation and also the roles that Cat Trust will play in this context. So Gemma, let's look towards what might be the coming next for the carbon markets. So do you think we'll see in the near future carbon credits that are fully digitalized with end-to-end carbon market life cycles supported by digital infrastructure like digital MRV, using sensors or satellite data to streamline from issuance and tracking or use and those carbon credits kind of flow? how close are we to that reality? So please share with your perspective, Gemma.
Thank you so much, Kazuhisa. And how close we are to fully digitized carbon markets, that's the ultimate aspiration, right? We're already seeing important components of the end-to-end digital stack working, particularly digital MRV and more advanced registry systems. However, full end-to-end digitalization across carbon markets is not a single finish line, but more like a phased transition. I would look at at 4 dimensions if I do some forward looking. In terms of technically speaking, is feasible, right? Many core building blocks already exist today: sensor, remote sensing data, digital reporting pipelines, automated validation checks, and registry platforms are capable of supporting API connections and data exchange. So it's technically feasible. What remains is consistency at scale and across jurisdictions. So achieving this broad market adoption of full digitization requires shared standards, interoperable architectures, greater legal and regulatory clarity, especially around authorization processes, corresponding adjustments, and also the data governance frameworks. In the coming years, I think we're likely to see hybrid models emerging where digital MRV increasingly supports verification and issuance workflows, while assurance functions like independent validation, verification oversight, or integrity checks remain robust and human-led, at least to a certain extent. And then digital tools will be augmenting and streamline the assurance processes, but maybe not fully replacing in the near term, right? And then for pilots and partial automation, we're not years away, but achieving full cross-jurisdictional harmonization, which that's the real challenge, and trust at scale will take much longer. So we're already close in a specific use cases, and it's quite exciting to see how the ecosystem is coming together, how in like less than a year or two, we are already exponentially looking at all these integrated solutions, and the trajectory is quite clear. But the pace of this full end-to-end digitalization will depend again on aligning standards, assurance frameworks, and governance arrangements, and not just advancing technology. So that's where I would see it, Kaz.
Thank you very much, Gemma. I also agree that digital MRV is technically feasible and durable. And we are also maybe close, and we are also getting a lot of kind of actual cases. We can see it. But at the same time, like a data standard, which you also talk about, and also regulatory clarity or like a governance or the infrastructure, which precisely the World Bank is supporting on these kind of tools and regulations to put in place. So those directions is really the right one. But at the same time, we really need to kind of see how the things will be, accelerated, and to the space where we are really automating the things. So thank you very much, really shedding the lights to our kind of where we are going, and that's where we are really directing. So thank you also for your sharing of the experiences and perspectives. So I'd like to thank you again for both of you, Gemma, Iba, and for joining us today for this very informative and very enlightening episode. I think it's very clear that digital infrastructure is really rapidly becoming essential for this carbon market, at the same time for really ensuring the environmental integrity and transparency and ultimately the trust in this market. So efforts from World Bank and CATRAS show that interoperability, linking diverse registry and data systems through shared models and metadata is really the key for making global carbon markets function smoothly. And early pilots already demonstrate how digital MRV, integrated registries and standardized data flows improve transparency and strengthen trust. So together, these developments point towards a future where the carbon markets are increasingly more data-driven and supporting climate actions at much more scale. Thank you both again for joining me today. And to learn more about A6IP, CATRAS, and World Bank, please check the links in the description. As we conclude this conversation, I'm proud to share that this episode marks a significant milestone, bringing this chapter of carbon markets now to a close. It has been an increasingly incredible journey, and we are very honored to reach this point on such a high note, especially with our recent recognition as a top 50 net zero podcast by FeedSpot. And thank you very much, FeedForce, for ranking our carbon market now. We will now be taking a break to strategically plan our next chapter and align our goals for the future. So thank you for listening to Carbon Markets Now. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and like and follow Article 6 Implementation Partnership A6IP to stay informed on the evolving world of international carbon markets. Thank you and bye-bye.
I'll now provide a few key updates about Article 6 and carbon market. We're starting with a big milestone. The Article 6.4 supervisory body has approved the first ever issuance of credits under the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism, or PACM. These credits come from a project on improved cook stoves in Myanmar, with a portion of the credits authorized and intended to be used to contribute to the Republic of Korea's national climate target. Additionally, during the 20th supervisory body meeting, 2 methodological tools were adopted. The tool on emissions from electricity generation and consumption establishes a standardized method for estimating the emissions linked to producing and using electricity. It is designed to allow flexibility while ensuring estimates remain conservative. The tool on determination of the technical lifetime of equipment outlines the requirements and available methods for determining the technical lifetime of equipment used in Article 6.4 activities. Additionally, Uzbekistan has marked a milestone by submitting its initial report to the UNFCCC. Transitioning to regulations and registries, Kenya has officially launched the Kenya National Carbon Registry, Nigeria has published its Carbon Market Framework, and Papua New Guinea has published its Climate Change Management Carbon Markets Regulation 2025.